I guess it's strange to think about how everything can change so quickly, and yet you never really see it coming. That's how it was for me. One minute, I'm lying in a hospital bed just trying to make sense of everything, and the next, I'm somewhere else entirely. But before I go there, let me introduce myself. My name is Yitzhak Lev, born and raised in a small town in New Jersey, a proud son of Jewish parents. I've always been devoted to my faith, the values passed down through generations, even if the world around me often seemed to be moving in a different direction. I'm a family man. I've been married to Miriam for almost a decade now, and our daughter Aviva is the light of my life. She's only 5, and I've already started teaching her the basics of the Hebrew prayers and what it means to live a righteous life. Not just through words, but through actions. It's important to me, it's a legacy, a connection to our roots. But it wasn't always just about my faith and family. Life also had its responsibilities. I'm a CPA, sounds boring, right? But it pays the bills, and for someone like me, that's a big deal. I'd worked hard to get here, even if the office life wasn't exactly fulfilling. Sitting in front of a computer for hours on end, crunching numbers and calculating taxes, it wasn't glamorous, but it was steady. And in the end, that's what I was after. Stability for Miriam, for Aviva. They meant the world to me. They still do, in ways I can't even describe. That morning was just like any other. I was at work, sipping my coffee, trying to get through the mountain of paperwork that seemed to grow faster than I could manage it. I kept my mind focused on the numbers, the spreadsheets, the deadlines. I didn't have time to think about much else. But as I sat there in that stale office, a thought lingered at the back of my mind. What happens if something happens to me? I know that's an odd thing to think about, but it wasn't just an abstract fear. It was real. Miriam, Aviva, they needed me. The thought of leaving them behind terrified me, and the sense of duty to provide for them, to be there for them, consumed me. I hadn't realized it before, but the pressure was beginning to weigh on me more than I cared to admit. I kept thinking about my wife, Miriam, and how much I loved her. She was the one who supported me through everything. Even when I'd come home late from work, too tired to do anything but collapse into bed, she never complained. Her patience was endless. But there was always this nagging feeling in the back of my mind that I wasn't doing enough for her. For our daughter. Sure, I paid the bills, but did I show them how much I loved them enough? Did I give them enough of my time? And that's when it hit me. The thing I had been pushing aside for months, my health. For weeks, I'd been feeling more and more exhausted. At first, I chalked it up to stress, but then the dizziness started. The headaches, the feeling of being out of breath after walking up a flight of stairs. It was like my body was telling me that I couldn't go on like this forever. But I didn't listen. I kept working. I couldn't afford to slow down, not when everything was so dependent on me. And then, of course, came the day I couldn't ignore it anymore. I was sitting at my desk, reviewing a client's tax returns, when the dizziness hit again. This time, it was worse. I stood up, but the world seemed to tilt and spin, my vision narrowing. My heart pounded in my chest, and I stumbled back to the chair, gripping the arms as if they could steady me. I don't remember exactly what happened after that. My boss called 911, and next thing I knew, I was being rushed to the hospital. I was out of it for a while, just enough time to slip into a kind of half-daze where reality and dreams mix together. But while I was lying there, alone in the sterile white room, I couldn't stop thinking about Miriam and Aviva. How would they manage without me? What would my absence mean for them? Miriam had always leaned on me, looked to me for guidance, and now, here I was, potentially facing something bigger than any of us could control. Code Blue. The announcement crackled over the hospital speaker. It sounded like some kind of mechanical hum to me, but I knew what it meant. Someone was in critical condition, someone else's life hanging in the balance. That's when the thought of my own mortality really hit me. If I didn't make it, if I didn't pull through, would Miriam be okay? Would Aviva be all right without her father? I could see her face, Miriam's face, staring at me, waiting for me to say something, anything, to reassure her. But I didn't have any words. Not then. And my daughter, I could only hope she would remember me. Would she grow up without knowing the man who loved her so deeply? The man who taught her to say the Shema before bed and to give tzedakah to the poor? I shook my head, trying to push those thoughts out. They weren't helpful right now. Right now, I had to focus on staying alive. But the weight of the situation was heavy, and the uncertainty about what came next was suffocating. God, please, I whispered under my breath, unsure if I even believed in a higher power in that moment. But I had no other recourse. My thoughts were scattered, but they always returned to the same place, my family. They were my world, and the thought of leaving them behind, it was unbearable. As I lay there, my thoughts were interrupted by the rhythmic beeping of the machines monitoring my heart rate. The beeping was steady, but it didn't comfort me. It was just another reminder that everything, my entire existence, was fragile. And yet, in the middle of this chaos, I still had a sense of duty. There was still so much more I needed to do, so many things I hadn't yet finished. The minutes stretched out, and eventually the steady hum of the hospital filled the room. The doctor came in, checked my vitals, and assured me that I'd be okay, but I couldn't shake the feeling that something was off. That nagging fear, the knowledge that my life might not be in my hands anymore, was there, sitting heavily on my chest. And then I fell asleep. As I drifted off, my mind raced. I had no idea what the future would hold. All I knew was that I loved my family, and I would do anything to protect them. But in that moment, as I closed my eyes, there was an eerie sense of calm, almost as if I was surrendering to whatever was to come next. Little did I know, I was about to enter a realm far beyond my understanding, a place that would challenge everything I had ever believed in. I had no idea it would feel like this. No idea at all. I always imagined death as something terrifying, something that would grip you in your final moments with an iron fist. The fear of the unknown, of letting go. But here I was, floating above my own body, watching it all unfold with a kind of eerie detachment, and I wasn't afraid. Not one bit. The moment of separation didn't come with any warning, no dramatic flash of light or the terrifying sense of suffocation you might read about in books. It just happened. One moment I was in the hospital bed, my body struggling to breathe, and the next, I was not in it. It was as though I was standing on the outside, looking down at the physical form that had once been my life. I could still feel the weight of it somehow, but it didn't belong to me anymore. The Yitzhak I knew was no longer tethered to it. The first thing I noticed was the sound, the beeping of machines, the frantic murmurs of the medical staff, the rush of footsteps as they came in and out of the room. They were trying to revive me, I realized, trying to bring me back to the body I had just left behind. I could see them now, working tirelessly, their faces full of concern and desperation. But I couldn't feel anything. I was too far away, too far above it all. Code blue, room 204, the speaker echoed again, and then I understood. The call was for me. I hadn't known it before, but now, standing, or rather, floating above the chaos, I could see the reality of my situation clearly. My heart had stopped, my lungs had ceased to function, my body, the one I had worked so hard to maintain, the one that had carried me through decades of life, was no longer mine. It had become just a shell. The first feeling I had, strange as it may sound, wasn't fear, not like I'd expected. Instead, there was a kind of quiet, peaceful detachment. I wasn't part of the action below, I wasn't part of the desperation. It was as if I was a spectator at a play I didn't have a role in. My body, my struggles, the doctor's efforts to revive me, they all seemed so distant now, like something from another life. And for the first time in what felt like forever, there was a profound sense of peace. I don't know why, but I wasn't scared. Maybe it's because in that moment I wasn't thinking about the usual stuff that filled my thoughts. My work, my bills, the need to keep up with all the obligations that weighed me down in life. None of that mattered now. And you know, in some strange way, I almost felt a sense of relief. The pressure was gone. The weight of responsibility, the constant worry about Miriam and Aviva was no longer there. I was free. It was a quiet kind of freedom, a soft and gentle liberation. But even in the serenity of this strange new state, my thoughts couldn't help but wander to them, to Miriam, to Aviva, to the life I had left behind. I looked at my body again. The team was working fast now, each of them doing their part to bring me back. I saw the defibrillator being placed on my chest, felt the sharp shock wave pulse through me. But I wasn't in my body anymore. I could only watch. It was as if I was looking at an old friend I hadn't seen in years, someone I once knew well but no longer recognized. I didn't know what was happening next. Was this death? Was I truly gone? I tried to focus on something, anything, that could give me a sense of clarity. And then it hit me, almost like a passing thought that I couldn't ignore. I was Jewish. I had always been Jewish. And the way I had been raised, the way I had raised my family, there was a deep, unspoken connection between us and the divine, wasn't there? Our people had wandered, struggled, been exiled from lands, and endured trials and hardships that I couldn't even fathom. But through it all, we had held on to our faith, held on to the belief that God would deliver us, guide us, and eventually bring us to a place of peace. But was this peace? I didn't know what the next chapter of my life would look like, but I thought about the prayers I had recited countless times, the Shema, the Kaddish, the Amida, prayers that had always provided comfort, but now they seemed distant. I had lived my life as a man of duty, striving to be a good husband, a good father, a good Jew. But was that enough? Was I enough? There was a strange irony in all this. I had spent years worrying about finances, deadlines, keeping up with the business of life. But when it all came down to it, none of that seemed to matter. It was as if the soul of a person, the love they gave, the prayers they said, it all held weight. And here I was, still floating above the chaos of my own death, wondering if I had truly been the man I wanted to be. I felt a pull, not a forceful one, but gentle, like a thread tethering me to something, someone. There was a sense of something greater, something sacred. It didn't feel strange, really. It felt familiar, like a return to something I had known all my life. Was it God? Was it the presence of my ancestors watching over me? I couldn't quite place it, but I knew one thing for sure. I wasn't alone. I could see the room below me, still buzzing with activity, but I felt an absence. Something was missing. The life I had lived, my connection to it, was no longer part of my reality. It was fading, like sand slipping through my fingers. And as I floated higher, I began to wonder about the world I was headed toward. Was it heaven? Was it just the afterlife? Or something more? What would I find when I crossed that line? Was it going to be as I had always imagined it from the stories, the angels, the peace, the divine presence of God? Or was it something else entirely? I had always believed in a God who was just, merciful, and kind. But I had never imagined this, a moment where I would leave the physical world behind and enter the unknown. And yet, as I continued to float, I didn't feel lost. I didn't feel abandoned. I felt okay, maybe even a little curious. I was leaving everything I had known, my work, my family, my responsibilities. But for the first time in what felt like forever, I could feel a lightness in my soul, as though I was being freed from the burdens I had carried so long. Was this the peace my ancestors had promised? Was this the reward for living a life of Torah and mitzvot? I didn't know. I didn't have all the answers. But as I floated upward, moving away from the body that had once been me, I felt a deep sense of calm. Peace, yes, but also something else, something more. And I had no idea where this path would lead. But for the first time in my life, I felt ready to take the next step. The last thing I remember, before the world as I knew it began to fade, was my family. Miriam's face, Aviva's smile, their love. And then the pull became stronger. The light, so bright and so warm, began to engulf me completely. I let go, allowing myself to be drawn into it. I had no fear, only wonder, only the strange, quiet feeling that everything was exactly as it was meant to be. What was ahead of me? I didn't know, but I was ready to find out. The light was beyond anything I could have imagined. It wasn't just bright, it was blinding, yet it didn't hurt my eyes. It was as though it radiated from everywhere at once, filling every corner of my being with warmth and clarity. I had never experienced anything like it. The moment I entered the light, it was as though every part of me, all the confusion, all the noise of life, faded into nothing. There was no sound, no time, just pure presence. And there, standing in the center of that light, was Jesus. I know it sounds absurd, doesn't it? Me, Yitzhak Lev, a proud Jew, raised in the traditions of our people, bound by the commandments of the Torah, standing before Jesus. My whole life, I had heard the stories, the Messiah, the Savior, the Son of God. But my people, the Jewish people, had always understood him differently, if at all. Some saw him as a prophet, others not at all. We waited for the coming of our own Messiah. a different kind of salvation. And I had always believed that the path to redemption lay through the Torah, through the mitzvot, through our covenant with Hashem. So to say I was shocked would be an understatement. In fact, I had no words for what was happening to me. But here I was, standing in front of Jesus. He wasn't at all like I had imagined from the pictures or the sermons I'd heard growing up. He didn't look like some distant, unreachable figure. No, he was real. His presence was immediate, tangible, almost like a living force that filled the space around me. There was a deep compassion in his eyes, an endless well of understanding and love that immediately overwhelmed me. His face was calm, kind, and yet there was something so intense about him. It was as though he knew everything about me without needing to ask. He knew my fears, my joys, my love for my family, and every bit of confusion I had ever felt about faith. I thought about Miriam, my wife, and Aviva, my daughter, and I felt something deep inside, something I can't quite describe, shift. The love I had for them, the sense of duty, the weight of my life's responsibilities, all of it seemed to pale in comparison to what I was feeling now. It was as though all the love I had felt for them had been amplified 1,000-fold. But it wasn't just love, it was something deeper, something universal, as if I was suddenly connected to all of humanity, to all of creation. And then I realized there was no judgment here. There was no expectation, no condemnation, no who are you to be here. Nothing like that. Just this overwhelming, unconditional love that I couldn't escape from even if I wanted to. And believe me, I didn't want to. Jesus, yes, I said it, Jesus, wasn't angry with me for not having known him during my time on earth. He didn't ask why I hadn't accepted him as my savior, why I'd never bowed my head in prayer to him, or why I'd remained so steadfast in my Jewish faith. There was no harshness, no rebuke. Instead, there was only this sense of total acceptance, as if everything I had done, all the questions I had, all the moments where I had been lost, he knew them and he loved me in spite of it all. I was amazed, no more than amazed. I was dumbfounded. How could this be? How could I, a man so rooted in the traditions of my people, find myself in the presence of a figure I had always been taught to regard as someone outside of my faith, even outside of my worldview? How could someone who had spent years devoting himself to Jewish teachings, to the laws and customs passed down through generations, come face to face with the man that my people had long rejected? And yet in that moment I realized none of it mattered. There was no need for explanations. There was no need to ask questions. All the confusion, all the theological barriers seemed to dissolve in his presence. I could feel his love pouring into me, enveloping me. It was warm and gentle, yet vast and all-consuming. It washed over me like a healing balm, and I felt a peace so profound, so complete, that I could hardly comprehend it. For the first time in my life, there was nothing to worry about. No more fear, no more uncertainty, just peace. I thought about my family again, Miriam, Aviva, and the overwhelming longing I had for them. How could I leave them behind? How could I bear the thought of never seeing them again, of leaving them to navigate a world without me? But in this moment, in the light of Jesus' presence, I felt a deep assurance that they too were loved, that they were taken care of, that somehow everything would be okay, even without me. Without words, without even the need for them, I understood that Jesus knew my heart. He knew my life, my struggles, and my deepest desires. He knew everything, not just the surface, but the very essence of who I was. It wasn't the kind of knowing that was distant or detached. It was intimate. It was the knowing of someone who loved you fully and unconditionally, with no strings attached, no agenda. And for some strange reason, I knew he understood my love for my family, this deep, profound love that had always guided my every action. He didn't need to ask about Miriam or Aviva. He didn't need to hear me speak their names. He knew. In that moment, I could feel the weight of my life. The years of struggling to be the man I thought I needed to be for my family, all of it melting away. There was no need to prove anything. I didn't have to be perfect. I didn't have to live up to some impossible standard. I was loved. I was accepted. It was so simple, yet so profound. I didn't know what this all meant. The theological implications, the questions of faith, those still lingered in the back of my mind, but they didn't matter. The world of belief that I had always known, everything I had learned as a Jewish man, everything that had shaped me, seemed irrelevant in the face of this love. This wasn't the kind of love I had expected. It wasn't the kind of love I had been taught to expect from the Jewish understanding of God. It wasn't bound by rules or rituals. It wasn't conditional on being chosen or not chosen. It wasn't about laws or commandments. It was pure. It was endless, and it was here for me. I felt as though I had been seen in a way I had never been seen before, not as a husband, a father, or a Jew, but simply as a soul who was loved, not for what I had done, but simply for who I was. And in that moment, I knew, deep in my being, that everything was going to be okay, not because I had the answers or because I understood everything, but because I had been enveloped by a love that transcended everything I had known. I didn't have to try so hard anymore. I didn't have to prove anything. I didn't have to worry about the weight of my family's future or whether I had lived a perfect life. I was loved, just as I was. It was overwhelming, and yet it was the most peaceful feeling I had ever known. The moment Jesus' presence began to fade, the light around me seemed to swell, becoming more brilliant, more radiant. It was as if the entire space, everything I had been drawn into, was shifting, transforming into something far more tangible. A new reality unfolded before my eyes, one so different from the hospital room where I had left my body behind. It was a world of breathtaking beauty, so vibrant, so alive with color and light, that I could scarcely believe it was real. I was in a city, but not just any city. This was a city of peace, of harmony. Its streets were lined with buildings made of some kind of stone that shimmered like diamonds in the sunlight. The roads were paved with what seemed to be a translucent material, glowing with a soft, gentle light. The air was warm but not oppressive, and I could sense an overwhelming stillness, like the city had existed for eternity in a state of perfect balance. It was heaven, or at least, that's what I thought it must be. But there was something unusual about it. It wasn't the overwhelming sense of solitude I had expected from the afterlife, where I would simply be a lone soul in the presence of God. No, this was a place of connection, a place of families, of people reunited with their loved ones. I saw them, families, hundreds of them, maybe thousands, walking hand in hand, embracing each other, children running to greet parents, spouses wrapping each other in tight, joyful embraces. The happiness in these reunions was palpable, their faces glowing with peace and love. It was as if they had all been apart for so long, and now, in this moment, they were whole again. The kind of reunion I had never seen in my own life, but one that felt somehow familiar, as though it was a destiny I had always been aware of but never fully understood. I watched, entranced, as children laughed and played in the streets. There were elderly people walking side by side with younger generations, their faces filled with deep, knowing smiles, as though they had lived 1,000 lives and now, finally, they were at peace. Everything about this place was perfect. There was no pain, no sorrow, only a pure, unbroken connection between everyone and everything. But as I looked closer, something inside me stirred. There, standing in the middle of all this beauty, was a deep yearning, a longing that cut through the peace around me. I realized that, despite the perfection of the world I was witnessing, something was missing. My family, Miriam, my dear wife, Aviva, my sweet daughter. They weren't here, not with me. I felt a pull, an ache so intense it was as if my heart itself was being drawn back to them. In the midst of all this love and reunion, I was reminded of my love for them, my responsibility to them, and the void their absence left in me. I had left them behind on earth, alone, struggling without me. And the realization hit me like a wave. I wasn't finished yet. My work, my purpose wasn't complete. I had been so focused on my own journey, so caught up in the beauty and peace around me, that I had forgotten what I was really here for. I was here to love them, to be with them, to guide them through the challenges of life, to fulfill my role as their husband, their father. I wasn't done yet. The beauty of this place, the peace that radiated from it, was overwhelming, but it was not mine to experience without first returning to those who needed me. I heard the voice again, Jesus. He wasn't standing in front of me now, but I could feel his presence, like a whisper on the wind. Your mission is not yet complete. Love binds you to the world you must return to. The words pierced me. They weren't a command, but a truth, one that settled deep in my soul. I wasn't just here in heaven for my own peace. I had come to realize that the love I carried, the love I had for Miriam, for Aviva, and for my people was a mission. It wasn't just about me finding rest or salvation. It was about spreading that love, about healing the world around me, about fulfilling the promise I had made to my family, to the generations before me, and to the future. But why was I so surprised by this? I had been raised with the teachings of the Torah, had heard the stories of our ancestors, of their devotion to family, to God, to the generations to come. Tzedakah tatzil mimavet. Charity saves from death. The responsibility we had to our families, our communities, was sacred. In our tradition, family wasn't just a unit. It was a spiritual bond, a divine calling. And now, in the presence of heaven itself, I realized the depth of that responsibility. I was a father and a husband, but I was also a vessel for the love that God had placed in me. And that love, whether I had fully understood it before or not, was something I needed to share. Not just in this beautiful world, but in the world I had left behind. I felt a sudden rush of clarity. This vision, this moment, wasn't just for me. It was a reminder of what truly mattered. Miriam needed me. Aviva needed me. My family needed me. They needed me to guide them, to love them, to provide for them in the way that only a husband, a father, a Jew could. The lessons I had learned, both from the Torah and now from this moment in heaven, were not just for me to take with me into eternity. They were meant to be shared. I was meant to return and fulfill that responsibility. I saw their faces clearly now, Miriam's warm smile, Aviva's innocent eyes. Their lives weren't finished either. They were still on earth, navigating a world filled with challenges, just like I had. And if I remained here, I would only be leaving them to face it alone. The vision around me began to fade. The radiant city, the families, the peace, it was all slipping away like sand through my fingers. But the feeling in my heart, the longing to return, only grew stronger. It was as though the very essence of heaven was telling me that love, the love I had for my family, the love I carried in my heart, was not bound by time, by place, or by death. It was eternal, and it was my mission. I turned inward, almost feeling the weight of the decision upon me. I could stay here in this place of peace and reunion, but that wouldn't be right. My family, my wife and daughter needed me. I needed to return to them. And just as the vision was fading, I heard Jesus' voice once more, echoing through the stillness. Go, Yitzhak, go back to them. Love binds you to the world you must return to. Your mission is not yet complete. There was no question in his tone, only compassion, only understanding. It wasn't about me choosing this path because I had to. It was about me realizing that this love I felt, this connection, was not just for my peace. It was for the world I had left behind. And it was a love that transcended everything. I couldn't stay here, not yet. And so, with that final whisper of clarity, I felt myself being drawn back, pulled away from the radiance, from the beauty of this vision, back toward the life I had left behind, the life I still had to live. I wasn't finished yet. As I felt myself being drawn back from the vision of heaven, the beauty around me began to dissolve, fading into something darker. The brilliance of the city, the joy of the reunions, the peaceful faces of those who had been made whole, all of it began to blur, as though the entire world was being filtered through a veil of smoke. And then, I saw it. It wasn't a single image, but a succession of images. Flashes of Earth in its current state. It wasn't just my world, it was the world that had been entrusted to us. A place I had once seen with hope, now splintered and torn apart by pain. I saw cities ravaged by war, buildings reduced to rubble as men and women, strangers and families alike, walked through streets littered with the debris of destruction. The cries of the wounded filled the air, but they were drowned by the sound of distant explosions. I saw families torn apart, people whose hearts were broken by the loss of loved ones, their lives shattered in an instant. I could see the agony in their eyes that once held hope, now filled with fear and despair. I saw the greed, the injustice. Men in power using their positions to oppress, to control, to destroy others. Entire communities suffering because of decisions made by those who cared only for their own wealth and power. The homeless wandering the streets, children starving, the elderly abandoned. The hunger was not just physical, it was spiritual. My heart ached as I watched the divisions spread like a disease, eating away at the very fabric of humanity. Communities once united by shared values, by faith, now fractured and divided. there was so much hatred, so much anger. It wasn't just the wars I saw or the poverty, but the brokenness of the people themselves. Hearts so filled with bitterness and resentment that they no longer knew how to love, how to forgive, how to heal. Families that had been torn apart by misunderstandings, by cruelty, by betrayal, divisions that ran deep like scars in the very soul of humanity. And yet, in the midst of all this pain, I saw something else, something that shone through the cracks. Even in the darkest moments, there were people offering help, people reaching out to each other, lifting one another up. There were those who still tried to live with kindness, those who had not lost the ability to love, to give, to show compassion. But those moments were rare. The brokenness of the world was so vast, so overwhelming, that the light seemed to be barely flickering. And in that moment, I understood. The weight of the realization hit me hard, like a fist to the chest. The world I had left behind was hurting. It wasn't just about me or my family anymore. It was about the entire world. Humanity was suffering, and it needed healing. It needed love. It needed the kind of healing I had felt in heaven, the kind of love that radiated from Jesus, the love I had experienced in his presence. The love I had been given not as a gift, but as a mission, a responsibility. And just as I processed this, I heard his voice again. This time it was different. There was an urgency in his tone, a sense of compassion that came with a profound weight. The world has lost its way. The time for healing is now. The words echoed in my mind, reverberating through the very core of my being. It wasn't just a statement, it was a calling. There is much work to be done to heal the brokenness of humanity. The words hung in the air, pregnant with meaning. It was as though Jesus was showing me something deeper than the surface level of the world's suffering. He wasn't just showing me the pain and the destruction. He was showing me the potential for healing, the possibility of restoration. But you must return. Your life has purpose. The love you carry within you can heal what is fractured. His voice was gentle, but there was a fire in it, an intensity that made my chest tighten with both awe and responsibility. He wasn't just telling me what was wrong with the world. He was telling me that I had something. We had something to give, something that could change the course of the suffering I had witnessed. I had always believed in the power of love, but I had never seen it as I saw it now. In my Jewish faith, we spoke often of chesed, kindness, loving kindness. It was a core tenet of who I was, what I practiced, what I believed. But now, standing before the profound truth of heaven and witnessing the brokenness of the world, I realized that the love I was capable of giving was something far greater than I had ever imagined. It was not just an action, it was a force, a healing energy that could restore not only individuals, but entire communities, entire nations, even the world. And yet it was a force that had to be actively shared. I thought about the Jewish concept of tikkun olam, the idea that we are partners with God in repairing the world. It was something I had heard growing up, something that had always resonated with me. But seeing the depth of the world's suffering now, I understood it in a way I never had before. The responsibility was not just to observe the brokenness, but to actively engage in healing it. Jesus' words echoed in my ears as the vision continued to unfold before me, shifting into images of communities coming together, offering help, showing compassion, and rebuilding what had been broken. The images were fleeting, and yet I knew what I was seeing was not a fantasy. It was a reality waiting to be realized. "Go," Jesus said, his voice now filled with quiet strength. "You are needed. You are a vessel of healing, and there is much work to be done. Go and spread the love you have been given. Heal what has been broken." I didn't fully understand all that he meant at the time, but I felt it. I felt the weight of it deep within me. I looked at the brokenness of the world one last time, the pain, the despair. It was real, and it was vast. But I also saw something else. There was hope. There were people who had not given up. There were those who still believed in love, in compassion, in healing. And I realized, just as I had learned in my Jewish upbringing, that we are not meant to sit idly by and let the world fall apart. We are meant to engage, to love, to heal. And that was why I had been called back. My mission wasn't just about my family, though it was a part of it. It was about the world, a broken, hurting world that still had the potential for redemption. And I, along with countless others, had a part to play in that healing. The vision of Earth faded, but the weight of what I had seen lingered. And with it, an understanding that my return wasn't just for my family or for myself. It was for the world, to help mend the wounds that ran deep within it. I had work to do, and it was time to begin. The vision of Earth, the suffering, the brokenness, the hope, faded, and the light that had once been so overwhelming began to soften. For a brief moment, everything felt suspended. Time, space, reality, they all seemed to blur together into something that was both infinite and immediate, something both vast and personal. It felt like I was standing at a crossroads. In my heart, I knew what had to be done. I had seen the pain, the desperation, the aching need for love and healing. I had witnessed the powerful, transformative force of compassion, the kind of love that crosses all boundaries, that heals even the deepest wounds. But in that moment, as the brightness around me began to fade, something even deeper tugged at my heart. The vision of my family on Earth, the faces of my wife and my daughter, was more vivid than ever. I couldn't deny it. The weight of responsibility toward them, the life I had yet to finish with them, was pulling me back. My family needs me. I thought about my wife, the woman who had stood by me through thick and thin, the one who had shared my dreams and fears, who had walked beside me through every stage of life. And my daughter, my baby girl, just beginning her journey, needing a father's love, guidance, and protection. I couldn't abandon them. I couldn't leave them behind, not when they were still walking their path. I knew what was at stake. I knew the importance of the mission I had been given, but I also knew the weight of being a father, a husband. As a Jew, family was everything to me. My faith had always taught me that the love between a parent and a child, the bonds of family, were sacred. It was our duty to protect and care for those we loved, to nurture those relationships, to ensure they grew strong and steady through the trials of life. Jesus had shown me the greater purpose, the healing power of love. But now I had to make a choice. Please, I found myself pleading. I hadn't expected to be in such a position, not after everything I had seen, but I needed to ask the question. My family needs me, my wife, my daughter. My voice broke as I said the words. My baby daughter needs her father. I felt the heaviness of that statement settle into the space between us. Jesus stood before me, his expression filled with understanding, compassion, but also something deeper, a knowing that went beyond the confines of time and space. He listened, his eyes gentle, his presence somehow calming, despite the magnitude of the situation. I could sense the depth of his love, the same love I had felt when I first encountered him. It was a love that was not possessive or demanding, but rather one that encouraged freedom and growth, and above all, purpose. He didn't rush to speak, he simply allowed the weight of the decision to settle. When he finally did speak, his words resonated deep within me, echoing in my very soul. Your love for them is a gift, he said, his voice soft yet powerful, but there is more for you to do. More? I had seen the suffering of the world. I had seen the families torn apart, the despair that hung over the world like a shadow. The love I had felt, the love I had seen, was so immense that it felt as though there could be no greater calling than to live within that love. To remain there, in the peace and unity of heaven, felt like it would be enough. But now, in this space, his words cut through that desire with a truth I hadn't been able to fully comprehend until now. There is much more for you to do, much more for you to give, he continued. You must return and show the world that love is the answer, that love can heal the brokenness you saw. A surge of realization coursed through me. It wasn't just about me. It wasn't about the peace I had felt in heaven or the vision of my family waiting for me on earth. It was about the mission of love. A love that didn't end with family, a love that could extend to others, to the world itself. A love that could heal and transform, if only it was shared. I could feel the weight of that responsibility settle on me, but this time it didn't feel like a burden. It felt like a call to return to my world, to help mend the brokenness I had seen. It was about more than just my immediate family. I had been given the strength, the love, and the purpose to help others see the healing power of compassion. For a moment I hesitated. I thought of my wife, my daughter, my home. I thought of the quiet moments we shared, the laughter, the warmth of family. I thought about the Shabbat meals we had, the prayers we said together, and the traditions I had always held dear. the traditions that connected me to my heritage, to my faith. As a Jew, I had always believed in the sacredness of family and the importance of love in healing the world. The tzedakah charity we gave, the Gemilut Chasadim, acts of kindness we performed, were ways to make the world better, to fulfill the divine commandment of caring for others. But what Jesus was asking of me now was not just a family mission, but a global one, a universal one that transcended religion, ethnicity, or culture. I realized that love, the love I had felt in heaven, was not limited to my faith or my family. It was something that transcended everything, something that could heal any brokenness, no matter the origin. With that understanding, the choice became clear. It wasn't about choosing between my family and the world. It was about embracing both. I could return, love my family deeply, but also love the world and share that love in ways that could heal the fractures I had seen. "Thank you," I whispered, feeling both gratitude and awe. Jesus smiled gently, a serene yet knowing expression. "Go in peace," he said softly, his voice a balm to my soul. "For your love will guide you and others. You are needed." The weight of his words was not a burden, but a gift. And in that moment, I knew without a doubt that I was ready. I wasn't just returning to my family. I was returning to a world that needed love, to heal, to guide, and to fulfill the purpose that had been set before me. I had always believed that our mission on earth was to repair what was broken, to tikkun olam, to heal the world. Now it was time to live that out, to truly embody the love that could heal not just my family, but the world itself. The light around me brightened again, and I felt myself being drawn back, gently, like a thread being pulled from heaven to earth. The love, the peace, the purpose, it was all with me. And I knew that I was no longer just a man going back to his life. I was a man on a mission, and I had everything I needed to fulfill it. As I felt myself being pulled back toward earth, a final, profound thought struck me. I was ready, and so I returned.